painting at my front door started at dawn, so loud and violent it felt like someone was trying to break through with their fists. I was still in my nightgown, hadn't even had my first cup of tea when I heard voices outside, angry, demanding, entitled. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was the building security, and I could hear the panic in his voice even before he spoke. "Ma'am, your daughter is downstairs with her husband and a team of movers. They're saying this apartment belongs to them now. They're saying you don't live here anymore." What should I tell them? I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart pounding, but my mind strangely calm. I looked around at the walls I had painted myself, the furniture I had chosen piece by piece, the photographs of a life I had built from nothing. This was my home, my sanctuary, and my own daughter was standing outside trying to take it from me. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I poured myself a cup of tea, took a slow sip, and thought about all the little moments that had led to this. Every dismissive comment, every time she spoke over me at family gatherings, every time her husband looked at me like I was a burden instead of a person. Every document I had quietly signed, every plan I had carefully set in motion without anyone knowing. When the guard asked me again what he should do, I smiled into the phone and said, "Let them in." Because what my daughter thought was a power move, what she believed was her moment of victory, was actually the beginning of her unraveling. She thought I was old, confused, too tired to fight back. She thought ownership was something you could just claim with a loud voice and a forged signature. What she didn't know was that I had been 3 steps ahead of her for years. What she didn't know was that every step she took toward humiliating me only brought her closer to the truth. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll see exactly how a mother's intuition became a daughter's reckoning, how silence can be the loudest weapon, and how a woman underestimated is a woman who wins. My name is Mary Ann Castellano. I'm 72 years old. I spent 45 years teaching literature at Lincoln High School, shaping young minds and building a life on my own terms after my husband Vincent passed away 18 years ago. This apartment, this beautiful 3-bedroom apartment overlooking the city skyline, is the home Vincent and I bought together in 1979. It's where we raised our daughter Sophia. It's where I thought I'd live out my remaining years in peace, surrounded by memories and books and the quiet comfort of a life well lived. The doorbell rang at 5:53 in the morning. Not a polite ring, not a hesitant press, a long, aggressive buzz that cut through my sleep like a knife through silk. I had been dreaming of Vincent, as I often do. His laugh, his hands, the way he used to read poetry to me on Sunday mornings. The sound ripped me from that warmth and dropped me into cold reality, my heart racing, my hands shaking. I pulled on my robe and walked slowly down the hallway. At my age, you learn not to rush toward trouble. Trouble will wait for you. Through the peephole, I could see shapes. More than one person crowding my doorway. The hallway light was harsh, fluorescent, making everything look washed out and unreal. When I opened the door, my daughter Sophia stood there. Beside her was Marcus, her husband of 6 years, holding a leather portfolio like it was a shield. Behind them, 4 men in navy uniforms waited near the elevator, a large rolling cart stacked with boxes at their feet. The words Premier Relocation Services were printed on their shirts in gold letters. Sophia spoke first. She always spoke first. "Good morning, Mama. I know this is early, but we wanted to get started before the heat kicks in." Her smile was practiced, the kind you rehearse in mirrors until it looks almost genuine. "This apartment is being prepared for sale. Marcus and I are handling your affairs now. You signed the authorization yourself, remember? We discussed this. You're going to be so much happier in the assisted living facility. It's what's best for everyone." She shifted the portfolio slightly, and I caught a glimpse of the documents inside. There, at the bottom of a page, were 2 signatures side by side. One was supposed to be mine, though I had no memory of ever writing it. The other I recognized immediately, my daughter's handwriting, bold and confident, the same handwriting I had watched develop from shaky childhood letters to the aggressive scrawl of adulthood. Strong. Marcus wouldn't look at me. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on a spot somewhere past my shoulder. He stared at the wall, at the ceiling, at anything that wasn't my face. In 6 years of knowing this man, I had learned to read his silences. This one screamed guilt. And then, across the hall, I saw Mrs. Chen's door crack open slightly. Mrs. Chen, who had been my neighbor for 23 years. Mrs. Chen, who never woke before 7. The door stayed open just a sliver, watching, listening, and something in my chest settled into place, a piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. Sophia kept talking, explaining timelines and logistics, using words like transition and appropriate care, and what's best for you. The movers shifted restlessly behind her, eager to start their work. Marcus remained frozen, a statue of guilt carved in the shape of my son-in-law. I could have argued. I could have demanded explanations, threatened lawyers, slammed the door in their faces. 18 years ago, when Vincent died and left me alone in this world, I might have done exactly that. But loss teaches you things that comfort never can. It teaches you about patience, about watching, about waiting for the right moment to strike. So instead of shouting, instead of weeping, instead of giving Sophia the reaction she had clearly prepared for, I simply stepped aside and said, "Come in then." Sophia's smile faltered. Just for a second. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. There and gone, like a shadow passing over water. This wasn't in her script. The confused old woman was supposed to protest, to make a scene, to give her justification for whatever story she planned to tell later. My calm unsettled her more than any tears could have. The movers filed past me into the apartment I had called home for 45 years. Their boots were heavy on the hardwood floors Vincent had refinished with his own hands. I watched them begin to assess my furniture, my memories, my life, reducing everything to items on a clipboard, numbers on an invoice. Sophia walked through the rooms like she owned them, pointing and directing, her voice sharp and businesslike. Marcus followed behind her like a shadow, still refusing to meet my eyes. At one point, he opened his mouth as if to speak, but Sophia touched his arm and he went silent immediately. The gesture was small, practiced, automatic. How many times had I seen her do that over the years? How many times had I watched my daughter control her husband with nothing more than a touch? They came to take my home. What they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment since the day I realized my daughter saw me as an obstacle instead of a mother. I just didn't expect the knife to be wielded quite so publicly, quite so early in the morning, quite so viciously. While the movers measured doorways and made notes on their tablets, I stood in the corner of my living room and let the memories wash over me. They could catalog the furniture, estimate the value of appliances, reduce this apartment to numbers on a spreadsheet. But they could never inventory what these walls truly held. Vincent and I bought this place in 1979. The economy was struggling. Interest rates were astronomical. And everyone told us we were fools to take on such a mortgage. But Vincent believed in investing in permanence, in building something that would last. He was a carpenter by trade, an artist by nature. He could look at a piece of wood and see the furniture it could become, look at an empty room and see a home. We painted every wall ourselves. Vincent built the bookshelves that lined the study, custom-fitted to hold my growing collection of novels and poetry. He installed the window seat in the bedroom where I used to sit and grade papers while he worked late into the night on his projects. Every corner of this apartment held his fingerprints, his love, his presence. Sophia was born in 1981, 2 years after we moved in. She took her first steps right here in this living room, wobbling across the hardwood toward my outstretched arms, while Vincent held his breath and prayed she wouldn't fall. She learned to read sitting on my lap in the big armchair by the window, sounding out words from the same books I would later teach to my students. This apartment watched my daughter grow from infant to child to teenager to woman. It held our Christmases and our arguments, our quiet dinners and our loud celebrations, our ordinary days that I didn't realize were precious until they were gone. 25 years ago, when Sophia was in college and Vincent's health was already starting to decline, my husband insisted we meet with an attorney about estate planning. I thought it was premature, unnecessary. We weren't wealthy people, just a teacher and a carpenter with a modest apartment and some savings. But Vincent had always been the practical one, the one who planned for futures he hoped would never arrive. We established a living trust to protect our assets, signed papers I barely understood, filed everything away in a safety deposit box at the bank. It seemed like bureaucracy at the time, nothing more than legal formality. I didn't know then that Vincent was building walls I couldn't see, protections I wouldn't understand until much later. Vincent passed 18 years ago. Heart disease, the doctor said, as if those 2 words could explain the collapse of my entire world. I held his hand in the hospital room while machines beeped their steady countdown, and I told him everything would be fine, the way wives do when they're lying to themselves as much as to their husbands. 3 days before he died, when he still had the strength to squeeze my fingers, he pulled me close and whispered something I dismissed as medication-induced confusion. "If anything happens to me," he said, "go to Thomas. He has things I couldn't tell you while I was well. Promise me, Marianne. Promise you'll go to him." Thomas Brennan was our attorney, the man who had helped us set up the trust all those years ago. Vincent and Thomas had been friends since childhood, the kind of friendship that survives decades and life changes and geographic distance. I loved Thomas like a brother, but I couldn't imagine what he could possibly have that Vincent couldn't simply tell me himself. So I made the promise because it cost me nothing to promise. I assumed Vincent was confused, mixing up his thoughts the way dying people sometimes do. Then he died, and the grief swallowed me whole, and Thomas came to the funeral and held my hand and told me to call if I needed anything. I never called. I never asked. I buried my husband, and I buried whatever message he had tried to leave me, because I was too broken to listen. Then Sophia brought Marcus into our lives. That was 8 years ago now, though it feels like both yesterday and a lifetime. He was charming in the way certain people are charming, the kind that makes you feel special for receiving their attention. He asked me questions about literature, about Vincent, about the apartment. He remembered my birthday, brought thoughtful gifts, called me Mama Marianne before the wedding invitations were even printed. Sophia seemed happier than I had ever seen her. What mother would question such a blessing? I watched a mover run his hand along the bookshelves Vincent had built, examining it like a piece of merchandise. And I thought about the promise I had failed to keep. My husband tried to tell me something before he died. I didn't listen then. Strong, but I'm listening now. Strong, but I'm listening now. If you feel my words, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're from, so I can see how far a woman's voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories to you. The change didn't happen all at once. That's how these things work, I suppose. If Sophia had shown her true face from the beginning, I would have seen her clearly. Instead, she revealed herself in increments so small, I mistook erosion for evolution, control for concern. It started after Vincent's funeral. Grief had hollowed me out, left me vulnerable in ways I didn't recognize. Sophia began visiting more often, bringing casseroles and sympathy, sitting with me at the kitchen table while Marcus worked late. She asked how I was managing, whether I was sleeping, if I needed help with anything around the apartment. Her attention felt like kindness. I didn't yet understand it was reconnaissance. The first suggestion came wrapped in worry. "You shouldn't take the subway alone anymore, Mama. The platforms are dangerous and your balance isn't what it used to be." I had been navigating the city's transit system for 50 years without incident. But she spoke with such conviction that I found myself agreeing. One concession seemed harmless. Then came another. "Let me handle your bills from now on. You might make mistakes with the online banking, and we don't want anything falling through the cracks. Before I understood what was happening, Sophia had inserted herself into every corner of my life. Then she redirected my mail to her address, explaining it was more efficient that way. She scheduled my doctor's appointments and insisted on attending them, sitting in the examination room and answering questions on my behalf, as if I had lost the ability to speak. She changed the passwords on my computer, claiming she was protecting me from scammers. She monitored my phone calls, always appearing in doorways when I picked up the receiver, always asking who I had been talking to when I hung up, and always asking what I had been doing in my own home. The apartment I had lived in for 45 years, the home where I had raised my daughter and buried my husband's memory in every room, slowly stopped feeling like mine. Sophia rearranged furniture without asking. She removed Vincent's photographs from the walls, storing them in boxes in the hall closet where they wouldn't collect dust. She suggested I might be more comfortable in the smaller bedroom, since the master suite was too much space for one person, even though I had never complained about the size. Each change was presented as a gift, a thoughtful adjustment for my benefit. Each change pushed me further toward the margins of my own existence. Marcus noticed nothing. Or perhaps he chose not to notice. He worked long hours at his financial consulting firm, came home tired, and accepted whatever version of reality Sophia presented to him. When I tried to raise concerns, gently, carefully, he dismissed them with the same phrase every time. "She's just trying to help Mama Marianne. You should be grateful." One evening, about 2 years after Vincent's death, Marcus mentioned something in passing that I filed away without understanding its significance. We were sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of orange and pink, and he said casually, "Sophia asked me to sign some papers yesterday. She said it was routine, something about updating your insurance policies." He shrugged as if it were the most boring topic in the world. "I didn't really read them. She handles all that stuff." I should have asked questions. I should have demanded to see those papers, insisted on understanding what my son-in-law had signed. But I was tired, and the sunset was beautiful, and I told myself it was probably nothing. Insurance paperwork, routine updates, the kind of mundane business that families deal with every day. That's one positive story. That night I went to bed early and lay awake staring at the ceiling. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. A shadow appeared at my door. Marcus stood there in the dim light, his hand on the frame, his face twisted with conflict I had never seen before. "Mama Marianne," he said quietly, "I need to—" From the living room, Sophia's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "Marcus, I need you right now." My son-in-law's mouth closed. Something shifted behind his eyes, a door slamming shut. He turned without another word and walked back down the hallway, his footsteps fading into silence. I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, waiting for him to return. He never did. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. I tried to bring it up over breakfast, but Sophia was there, pouring coffee, filling the room with chatter about weekend plans and grocery lists. Marcus ate his eggs and said nothing. The moment had passed, swallowed by the machinery of Sophia's careful control. I replayed that scene 1,000 times in the months that followed. Marcus at my door, trying to tell me something, needing to speak words his wife wouldn't let him say. Every time he tried, her voice pulled him back. I should have walked to him. I should have closed that door behind us both. The discovery came by accident, the way so many life-altering moments do. I was searching for a book that had fallen behind my nightstand, down on my knees with a flashlight, when my fingers brushed against paper. An envelope had slipped into the narrow gap between the furniture and the wall, probably months ago, forgotten and gathering dust in the darkness. I pulled it out and sat back on my heels, recognizing it as an old bank statement from the previous quarter. Sophia had taken over managing my accounts, so I rarely saw these statements anymore. I almost threw it away without opening it, almost. But something made me pause, some instinct I couldn't name. and I slid my finger under the flap. Inside the envelope, tucked behind the bank statement like a secret passenger, was a document I had never seen before. The header read, "Durable Power of Attorney for Finances," in bold black letters. Legal language filled the page. Dense paragraphs about authority and decision-making and the right to act on behalf of another person. My eyes skipped past the formalities and landed on the signature line at the bottom. My name was there. Marianne Castellano. Written in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite. The letters were too careful, too deliberate, as if someone had practiced them repeatedly before committing pen to paper. And the date beside the signature stopped my heart cold. 4 months ago. The document claimed I had signed it 4 months ago, on a Wednesday in June. I remembered that week with perfect clarity because I hadn't been home. I had been in Boston visiting my sister Catherine, helping her recover from hip replacement surgery. I spent 8 days there, cooking meals she couldn't prepare herself, keeping her company during the long afternoons of recovery. I had photographs on my phone from that trip, timestamps that proved exactly where I had been. I had not signed this document. I could not have signed it. Someone had forged my signature and backdated it to a week when I had a perfect alibi. My hands trembled as I looked further down the page. Below the line for my signature was another line marked with a single word, witness. A witness signature is required to validate a power of attorney, to confirm that the person signing is who they claim to be, that they're signing of their own free will. The witness is supposed to watch the signature happen to verify its authenticity. The name written on that line was Sofia Castellano Rivera. My daughter's handwriting. My daughter's signature. Unmistakable. I sat on the floor of my bedroom for a long time, the document resting in my lap, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Sofia had signed as witness to a signature I never made. She had put her name on a legal document attesting that she watched me sign something I had never signed. Either my daughter had knowingly participated in forgery, or she had been deceived into believing she was witnessing something legitimate. The memory surfaced like a body rising from deep water. Marcus on the balcony, sunset painting the sky. His voice casual and unconcerned. Sofia asked me to sign some papers yesterday. She said it was routine, something about insurance policies. He hadn't read them. He trusted his wife. He signed where she pointed and asked no questions. Had Sofia done the same to herself? Had she slipped this document into a stack of innocent paperwork and guided her own pen to the witness line without explaining what she was truly signing? Drang strong. I wanted to believe that version of events. I wanted to believe my daughter was also a victim, too. That someone else, Marcus perhaps, or some external manipulator, had orchestrated this forgery and used both of us as pawns. Drang strong. That's it. The alternative meant my daughter had looked at a forged signature bearing her mother's name and chosen to validate the lie. Strong. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. If Sofia was innocent, warning her would only alert whoever was truly responsible that I had found the document. They would destroy evidence, create new lies, tighten their control. If Sofia was guilty, confronting her would accomplish nothing except to arm my enemy with knowledge of my suspicions. Either way, I needed more information before I made any move. That night, I began keeping a journal. I found an old notebook in my desk drawer, one I had used years ago for lesson planning, and I started writing down everything. Every strange comment Sofia had made, every document she had asked me to sign, every moment when Marcus had seemed on the verge of saying something before pulling back. I recorded dates and times and exact words when I could remember them. I noted the week I had been in Boston. The bank statement it had hidden this terrible secret, the signature that was not mine but wore my name like stolen clothing. I hid the journal in a place Sofia would never think to look. Inside the dust jacket of an old hardcover book on my shelf. A collection of Sylvia Plath poems that had been Vincent's favorite. The hiding spot felt appropriate somehow. Vincent's love, protecting my secrets. The power of attorney gave Sophia, or gave someone, legal authority to make decisions on my behalf, to access my accounts, to sell my property. With this single piece of paper, she could dismantle everything Vincent and I had built. I returned the bank statement to the gap behind the nightstand, weaving everything exactly as I had found it. Let Sophia believe her secrets were still safe. Let her think the old woman suspected nothing. My signature was forged, but it was my daughter's hand that made the lie look real. Did she know? Or was she just another tool in someone else's workshop? I kept my discovery buried for 3 weeks, watching Sophia with new eyes while pretending nothing had changed. She moved through my apartment with the confidence of someone who believed her victory was already complete. I let her believe it. I smiled when she suggested changes to my schedule, nodded when she explained why certain decisions needed to be made without consulting me, played the role of the declining old woman she needed me to be. All the while, I watched. I listened. I wrote everything down in the journal, hidden behind Sylvia Plath's haunting words. The truth revealed itself on a Thursday afternoon. Sophia thought I was napping, which had become my habit after lunch. Another small surrender she had orchestrated to keep me out of her way during the productive hours of the day. But I hadn't been sleeping well since finding that document. On this particular afternoon, I came out of my bedroom for a glass of water, moving quietly in my slippers, the way I had learned to move in my own home. Sophia was in the kitchen, her back to the hallway, phone pressed against her ear. She spoke in that low, confident tone of someone conducting business, unaware that the walls had grown ears. "Once we liquidate the apartment, we'll have enough to start the business," she said. "The market's strong right now, and the property's worth more than she realizes. We need to move quickly before she starts asking questions or before someone gets suspicious." A pause while she listened to whoever was on the other end. Then she laughed, a sound I had once found musical, but now recognized as something colder. "She doesn't even know what she's signing half the time. Honestly, Marcus was right. It's almost too easy. The power of attorney was the smartest thing we did." I pressed myself against the wall of the hallway, my heart hammering so loud I was afraid she would hear it. She continued talking, discussing timelines and paperwork and the importance of keeping everything looking legitimate. I heard my own name spoken like a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. This wasn't about taking care of me. This wasn't about concern or love or what's best for everyone. This was about money, about assets, about liquidating my life so my daughter could fund whatever dream she and Marcus had been nurturing in secret. When I heard her footsteps approaching the hallway, I retreated silently back to my bedroom and closed the door without a sound. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, letting the full weight of her words settle over me like a shroud. My first instinct was confrontation. I wanted to march out there and throw the forged power of attorney in her face, demand explanations, force her to choose between truth and lies. But I had spent 72 years learning that first instincts are often the most dangerous ones. Confrontation would accomplish nothing except to alert Sophia that I knew her game. She would deny everything, paint me as confused and paranoid, and Marcus would believe her because Marcus always believed her. I would lose my daughter and my home in one reckless moment. No, I wouldn't fight with emotion. I would fight with truth, carefully gathered and strategically deployed. Patience had never come naturally to me. But Vincent used to say that patience was simply wisdom waiting for the right moment. I would wait. I would watch. And when the time came, I would be ready. The next morning, I told Sophia I was going for a walk around the neighborhood. She barely looked up from her laptop, already absorbed in whatever schemes required her attention. I walked out the front door and took the elevator down 6 floors. Then I crossed the street to the office building where Thomas Brennan had practiced law for 35 years. The first time I had seen him since we buried Vincent 18 years ago. Thomas opened the door before I could knock, as if he had been watching from the window. He was 75 years old now, white-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a cardigan that looked exactly like one Vincent used to wear. He looked at me for a long moment, studying my face the way old friends do when they're searching for traces of the people they used to know. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him. "Come in, Marianne," he said. "I've been expecting you." We sat in Thomas's office, surrounded by law books and framed photographs, and the accumulated evidence of a career spent helping people navigate the legal complexities of their lives. He poured tea without asking if I wanted any, and I accepted it without protest. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had known each other long enough that words were sometimes unnecessary. Finally, Thomas set down his cup and met my eyes. "Vincent told me you'd come eventually," he said. "He said you'd only come when you were ready to listen." The words hit me like a physical blow. Ready to listen to what? Thomas's expression softened, but there was steel beneath the sympathy. "Not yet," he said. "First, let her make her move. Sophia, I mean. Let her show her whole hand. Then I'll show you what your husband left behind." I wanted to demand answers immediately, to insist he tell me everything right now, but something in Thomas's tone stopped me. He wasn't being cruel or evasive. He was following instructions, the same way Vincent had always given instructions, with purpose and precision. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Long enough," he said. Vincent saw things clearly, even when he was sick, especially when he was sick. He knew this day would come, and he prepared for it. The only question was whether you would be ready when it arrived. I left Thomas's office an hour later, my mind churning with questions I couldn't yet answer. Vincent had seen Sophia for what she was. Vincent had prepared something, and Thomas had been guarding that secret all along, waiting for a moment he hoped would never arrive, but knew inevitably would. Vincent knew. My husband had known something, and Thomas had been waiting 18 years to tell me what it was. The day Sophia chose for her public performance arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of bright morning that draws people out of their apartments and into the streets. I understood later that this was no accident. Sophia planned everything, including the weather's role in ensuring maximum visibility for what she intended to present as a family decision made with love and concern. The moving truck returned at 9 in the morning, larger than before, accompanied by a crew of 6 men in matching uniforms. Sophia had dressed for the occasion in a soft cream blouse and tailored pants, her hair styled, her makeup subtle but deliberate. She looked like a woman from a lifestyle magazine, the kind of daughter any parent would be grateful to have. The costume was perfect. Neighbors began gathering within the hour. Mrs. Chen from across the hall stopped to watch. The Harrisons from downstairs paused their morning routine and drifted toward the building entrance. The young couple who had moved in last month stood by the mailboxes with coffee cups in hand, observing the spectacle with the detached curiosity of people watching a drama unfold in real life. By noon, a small crowd had assembled in the lobby and on the sidewalk, pretending to check mail and water plants while keeping their eyes fixed on the movers carrying boxes out of my apartment. Sophia moved among them like a politician working a crowd. I watched from my balcony as she approached each cluster of Nagans, touching arms, lowering her voice to a confidential murmur, shaking her head with practiced sorrow. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. "We're just helping Mama transition to assisted living," she told Mrs. Chen, loud enough for others to overhear. "It's what's best for her at this stage. The apartment is too much for one person, and we worry about her being alone. You understand?" Mrs. Chen nodded sympathetically, glancing up at my balcony with eyes full of pity. "Of course, dear. You're doing the right thing. It must be so difficult." "It is," Sophia said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue she had produced from nowhere. "But family takes care of family." That's what Papa Vincent would have wanted. The invocation of my dead husband's name hit me like a blow to the chest. Sophia had barely known Vincent. She was 23 when he died, already living her own life, visiting only on holidays and birthdays. She had no right to speak for what Vincent would have wanted. But I said nothing. I stood on my balcony, surrounded by the sounds of my life being dismantled, and I kept my silence. Some neighbors avoided looking up at me entirely, embarrassed to witness what they perceived as the sad decline of a woman they had known for decades. Others whispered to each other behind cupped hands, no doubt discussing whether I had agreed to this or whether I was too far gone to resist. I heard fragments of their speculation carried on the wind. Such a shame. She hasn't been right since Vincent passed. At least Sophia is taking responsibility. Some children just abandon their parents. I heard she's been forgetting things, leaving the stove on, getting confused about what day it is. Lies. All of it lies. But lies that Sophia had been carefully planting for months, preparing the ground for this exact performance. Marcus stood beside his wife throughout the morning, a silent shadow in her performance. He held clipboards when she handed them to him, pointed movers toward rooms when she directed him, nodded along with her conversations without contributing words of his own. But he never looked at the neighbors. He never looked up at me. His eyes remained fixed on the ground, on the truck, on anything that wasn't a human face requiring acknowledgement. I recognized shame when I saw it. The question was whether he felt shame for what he was doing or merely for being seen doing it. The afternoon sun had begun its descent when I saw Mrs. Chen cross the street to a small office building. She returned 20 minutes later, and this time she wasn't alone. Thomas Brennan emerged from the building entrance with the unhurried confidence of a man who had spent 75 years learning that patience was its own form of power. He walked across the street, past the gawking neighbors, past the movers, past Sophia with her practiced grief. He stopped directly in front of the building entrance, blocking the path of a mover carrying one of my dining room chairs. Sophia noticed him immediately. I saw my daughter's shoulders tense, her smile faltering for just a moment before she reassembled her expression into something welcoming. Thomas ignored her entirely. He looked up at my balcony, caught my eye, and gave me the smallest nod. Then he turned to face Sophia with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile that lawyers give to opponents they've already decided to defeat. "Sophia," he said, his voice carrying across the street for everyone to hear. "I think we need to talk about your mother's estate. There are some documents you should see." Sophia's practiced composure flickered, her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. She sensed danger without being able to identify its source, like an animal catching a scent on the wind. "I don't know what you're talking about, Thomas," she said carefully. "Everything is in order. Mama signed the power of attorney herself. Marcus witnessed it. To promise." "So, is that so?" Thomas reached into his briefcase and withdrew a folder. "Then perhaps you can explain why your mother's signature appears on a document dated June 15th, when she was actually in Boston caring for her sister. I have hospital records, flight receipts, and about a dozen witnesses who can confirm she was nowhere near this city that week." The color drained from Sophia's face. The whole neighborhood watched her realize she had made a terrible mistake. Only one person there knew the full truth, and he had been waiting 18 years to reveal it. That evening, Thomas drove me to his office. We didn't speak during the short journey. There was nothing left to say. Everything that mattered would be said in the meeting he had scheduled for the following day. Thomas had arranged the space with deliberate care. 5 chairs formed a loose semicircle facing his desk, positioned so that everyone could see everyone else. Late afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the carpet. A pitcher of water and several glasses sat untouched on a side table. The room smelled faintly of old paper and leather, the scent of serious business conducted in quiet spaces. I arrived first, taking my seat to Thomas's left. Mrs. Chen settled beside me, her presence a steady anchor against the storm to come. We waited in silence, watching the door, listening to the muffled sounds of the city outside. Sophia entered next, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with a confidence that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had dressed carefully again, professionally. Armor constructed from expensive fabric and perfect makeup. But I could see the cracks beneath the surface. The tension in her jaw. The way her fingers gripped her handbag just a little too tightly. She took her seat without greeting anyone, her spine rigid, her gaze fixed on some point beyond Thomas's head. Marcus came last, and the distance he chose spoke louder than any words. Instead of sitting beside his wife, he selected the chair farthest from her, leaving an empty seat between them like a chasm that had been growing for years and was only now becoming visible. Sophia noticed, her head turned sharply, her eyes narrowing, but Marcus wouldn't look at her. He stared at the floor, at his hands, at anything that wasn't his wife's face. Thomas waited until everyone was settled, then rose and closed the door with a soft click that seemed to seal us all inside. He returned to his desk and opened a folder that had been waiting there, its contents arranged with the precision I had come to expect from him. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm, professional, betraying nothing. "I've asked you here to discuss matters pertaining to Marianne Castellano's estate and certain irregularities that have come to my attention." He lifted the first document from the folder and placed it on the desk where everyone could see. "This is the living trust established by Vincent and Marianne Castellano in 1998. It was amended 17 years ago, 3 days before Vincent's death. The amendment establishes that the apartment on East 73rd Street is held in trust, with myself as trustee. Under the terms of this document, no major decisions regarding the property, including sale or transfer, can be made without my explicit approval." Sophia's composure flickered. I watched her absorb the information, watched her realize that the ground she had built her plans upon had never been solid. Thomas placed a second document beside the first. "This is a durable power of attorney for finances, dated 4 months ago, bearing Marianne Castellano's signature. According to this document, Marianne granted Sofia Rivera broad authority over her financial and legal affairs." He paused, letting the silence stretch. However, Marianne was not in this state on the date this document claims to have been signed. She was in Boston, Massachusetts, caring for her sister after hip replacement surgery. A fact supported by medical records, flight receipts, hotel bills, and multiple witnesses. "The signature on this document is a forgery." Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but Thomas continued before she could form words. He placed a third document on the desk, and this time his eyes moved to Marcus. "This is the witness attestation on the forged power of attorney. The signature belongs to Marcus Rivera. A witness signature certifies that the signatory observed the principal signing the document of their own free will." Thomas's voice remained steady, almost gentle. "Marcus, did you observe Marianne signing this document?" Marcus's voice was barely audible. "No. I signed papers Sophia gave me. She said they were routine insurance updates for Mama Marianne's policies." The fourth document landed on the desk. "Aaron, tending a hackadamic ad in service terms, large transfers made to a joint account belonging to Sophia and Marcus Rivera. Payments to contractors for apartment renovations that were never performed. Withdrawals that Marianne never authorized." Strong. Thomas folded his hands on his desk. "In strong. Mrs. Rivera, you have 2 options. Option 1. Sign an agreement relinquishing all claims to your mother's assets. Return every dollar you've taken from her accounts, and leave the city within 30 days. This matter remains civil, and no criminal charges will be filed." He paused, letting the weight of the alternative settle over the room. "Option 2. I forward this evidence to the district attorney's office. Forgery of a legal document is a Class D felony in this state, punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Additionally, the pattern of financial exploitation suggests elder abuse, which carries additional charges and penalties." The room was silent. I could hear Sophia breathing, shallow and quick, the sound of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. Sophia turned to Marcus, her mask finally crumbling. "Say something. Tell them this is ridiculous. Tell them I would never. Marcus, please. We're married." "You know me." Marcus raised his head slowly and met his wife's eyes for the first time since entering the room. I saw something shift in his expression, something that might have been grief, or might have been relief, or might have been both at once. He said nothing. The silence stretched into seconds, then longer. Sophia looked from Marcus to Thomas to Mrs. Chen to me. Searching for an ally, finding none. For 8 years she had controlled every room she entered, manipulated every conversation, bent every person to her will. But in that moment, for the first time, the room controlled her. The silence that followed Marcus's refusal to speak stretched into something unbearable. I watched Sophia's face cycle through emotions like a storm gathering strength, confusion, then disbelief, then the first cracks of genuine fear. But beneath all of that, rising like lava through fractured stone, came rage. "You think you're so righteous," she said, her voice climbing in pitch, the careful modulation she had maintained for years beginning to splinter. "All of you, sitting there in judgment. You never wanted me in this family, not from the beginning. Neither did he, your precious Vincent, looking down his nose at me every holiday, every dinner, every single moment we were in the same room. I met her eyes and felt nothing but the calm that comes from finally understanding your enemy. 'You're right,' I said, my voice steady. 'He didn't trust you, and he was right not to.' The words landed like a match thrown into dry kindling. Sophia's composure, already crumbling, collapsed entirely. She turned on me with venom I had glimpsed before but never seen fully unleashed. Vincent was a controlling, manipulative man who couldn't stand to let anyone else have power. He poisoned this family against me from the start. And you, she jabbed a finger in my direction. You were always cold, distant. You never tried to know me, never asked about my life, my dreams. You just sat in your apartment and judged me the way he did." She spun toward Mrs. Chen. "And you, the loyal neighbor, the keeper of secrets, you've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting to destroy me. What kind of person watches and waits for years, just hoping for a chance to use it?" Mrs. Chen didn't flinch. She simply looked at Sophia with the patient expression of someone who had seen tantrums before and knew they always burn themselves out. Finding no purchase there, Sophia turned finally to Marcus, her husband, the man she had controlled for 8 years through manipulation and manufactured isolation. When she spoke to him, her voice dropped to something that was almost pleading, though the anger still simmered beneath. "Marcus, you can't seriously be taking their side. After everything I've done for you, I built our life. I managed our finances. I took care of your precious Mama Marianne when no one else would. And this is how you repay me? By sitting there like a coward while they tear apart our marriage?" Marcus remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Say something," Sophia shrieked. "Defend me. Defend us." Arj. Still nothing. The desperation curdled back into fury. Sophia's face twisted, and what came next was the truth she had kept hidden beneath years of careful performance. "Marcus is pathetic." The words exploded from her like something long suppressed, finally breaking free. "He can't do anything without me telling him what to do, what to think, what to feel. He's weak. He's always been weak. You daughter raised a coward, Marianne. A spineless, gutless coward who couldn't stand up for himself if his life depended on it." The room went completely still. Even the ambient sounds of the city seemed to hold their breath. I watched Marcus's face as his wife's words washed over him, watched something shift behind his eyes, something that had been dormant for years, finally stirring awake. Marcus stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, carrying a weight that made everyone in the room turn toward him. He didn't look at Sophia. He walked past the empty chair between them, past Mrs. Chen, past Thomas's desk, until he stood beside me. Then he turned to face the woman he had married. "I'm done, Sophia." His voice was quiet but steady, steadier than I had heard it in years. "You made me believe that Mama Marianne was declining, that she needed to be managed, controlled. You made me sign papers I didn't understand. You used my trust against the woman who welcomed me into this family like a son." His voice cracked slightly but didn't break. "You put a pen in my hand and told me to sign routine documents. You used my trust to hurt someone I love. You made me complicit in stealing from a woman who had only ever been kind to me." He turned to me, and I saw real Marcus looking back at me for the first time in longer than I could remember. "I'm sorry, Mama Marianne. I should have been stronger. I should have seen what she was doing. I should have fought harder." I rose from my chair and placed my hand on his arm, feeling the tension there, the years of accumulated weight he had been carrying alone. "You're here now," I said. "That's enough." We stood together, mother-in-law and son-in-law, united for the first time in years. Across the room, Sophia looked from Marcus to me, then to Mrs. Chen, then to Thomas. She was searching for something, an ally, an escape, a crack in the wall that had formed around her. She found nothing. Thomas slid the agreement across his desk toward the empty chair Sophia had vacated. "Mrs. Rivera, your decision." For a long moment, Sophia didn't move. I could see her calculating, searching for angles, for leverage, for any way to turn the situation to her advantage. But there was nothing left to manipulate. The evidence was undeniable. The allies she had counted on had evaporated. A husband she had controlled had finally broken free. She walked to the desk with stiff, mechanical steps. She picked up Thomas's pen. Her hand trembled as she signed her name on the document, the signature shaky and small compared to the bold strokes I had seen on the forged power of attorney. Without a word, without a backward glance, she set down the pen and walked out of the room. Her heels clicked against the floor, growing fainter until the outer door opened and closed. Then there was only silence. She walked out the same way she had walked in 8 years ago, alone. The difference was, this time she knew why. If you feel my words, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're from so I can see how far a woman's voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories to you. 4 months have passed since that day in Thomas's office. The seasons have changed, and so has the landscape of my life. The apartment on East 73rd Street stands quiet again, returned to me by law and by right, though it took weeks before it felt like home rather than a battlefield. I moved back in on a Tuesday afternoon, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and the wooden box Thomas had kept for me all these years. Vincent's final gift, his last act of protection reaching across the gulf of death to shield me from dangers he saw coming years before they arrived. M. The movers Sophia had hired were long gone. The furniture they had removed remained in a storage facility for a time, waiting for legal matters to be settled. Eventually, Marcus arranged for everything to be returned. He spent a weekend helping me put the apartment back together, placing furniture where it belonged, hanging Vincent's photographs back on the walls. M. We didn't talk much during those 2 days. We didn't need to. The work itself was a kind of healing, a rebuilding of space and trust and the possibility of something better. News of Sophia's departure spread through the neighborhood with the inevitable speed of small community gossip. She had 30 days to leave the city under the terms of the agreement, and she used every one of them, though not by choice. The consequences of her actions arrived faster than she could outrun them. Her employer learned of the situation first. Someone in Thomas's office knew someone at the marketing firm where Sophia had worked for 7 years. The details were vague but damaging. Financial exploitation, forged documents, elder abuse. No company wants that kind of association. Sophia was let go within a week. I took no pleasure in her professional destruction, but I couldn't pretend to feel sorry either. Her social circle collapsed next. The same networks that had carried news of her firing also carried whispers about the details. Friends who had once admired her ambition now avoided her calls. The book club stopped sending invitations. The yoga studio partners found new schedules. Sophia had built her entire identity on the image of a devoted daughter and successful professional. When that image shattered, so did everything constructed upon it. The final blow came from her own family. Her mother, a woman I had met only 3 times over 8 years, called Marcus looking for answers. What she learned prompted her to make calls of her own, digging into her daughter's history. Apparently, this was not Sophia's first manipulation. There had been incidents before. Money borrowed from relatives and never repaid. Relationships exploited and discarded. A pattern that stretched back years, ignored by a family who chose to overlook warning signs because confronting them was too uncomfortable. They could not overlook this. Sophia left the city with nothing but her car and whatever she could fit inside it. I heard through Mrs. Chen that she moved to a small town upstate, working retail, rebuilding a life from the ruins of the one she had tried to steal. Part of me wondered if she would learn anything from this experience. Its consequence might teach what conscience had not. But that was no longer my concern. I had spent too many years trying to understand people who refused to be understood. Marcus filed for divorce the week after the meeting in Thomas's office. The process would take months, complicated by shared assets and the legal untangling of 8 years of marriage. But the decision itself was immediate and final. He called me the night he signed the papers, his voice tired but clear. I should have done this years ago, Mama Marianne. I should have seen what she was. I'm sorry it took so long. You're doing it now, I told him. That's what matters. Marcus also started therapy, something he had never considered during his marriage. Sophia had dismissed the idea whenever it arose, calling it unnecessary, self-indulgent, a sign of weakness. Now Marcus sat in a counselor's office twice a week, learning to recognize the voice in his head that had been programmed by someone else. He told me it was the hardest thing he had ever done. Some days he questioned everything, wondering if his own thoughts were truly his own, or just echoes of her control. But he kept going back. We began having dinner together once a week. Every Thursday evening, Marcus would drive to the apartment where he had spent so many uncomfortable holidays, and we would sit at the kitchen table with whatever simple meal I had prepared. The conversations were sometimes awkward, often short. We had lost 8 years of easy communication, and rebuilding it was like learning a language we had both forgotten. But we kept showing up. That was what mattered. Mrs. Chen visits regularly, usually on Sunday afternoons, always bringing something she's baked. Her almond cookies have become a fixture of those visits, the recipe identical to one my mother used to make decades ago. The taste brings my childhood back to me in ways that photographs and letters cannot. Sensory memory that bypasses grief and goes straight to gratitude. End of story. End. One evening as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of orange and pink, Mrs. Chen set down her tea and looked at me with eyes that held decades of quiet friendship. And end of story. End. One evening as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of orange and pink, I reached over and took her hand, the same hand that had knocked on my door countless times over 23 years, that had held mine at Vincent's funeral, that had witnessed Sophia's public performance and known immediately that something was wrong. End of strong. He would be proud of you too, I said. You kept watch. You bore witness. You didn't look away. End of strong. Mrs. Chen squeezed my fingers and smiled, and we sat together in comfortable silence as the light faded and the first stars appeared. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just life catching up with the lies, one quiet consequence at a time. A year has passed since the day Sophia walked out of Thomas's office. The apartment on East 73rd Street has slowly remembered how to breathe. The rooms that once felt like occupied territory have reclaimed their original purpose. Spaces for living rather than surviving. For memories rather than vigilance. I wake each morning in the bedroom Vincent and I shared for 36 years, and the first thing I see is sunlight streaming through the windows he insisted on making large enough to catch the dawn. The city sounds filter up from the streets below, car horns, voices, the rhythm of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful chaos. Vincent's books still line the shelves he built. His favorite armchair sits by the window, where he used to read poetry on Sunday mornings. I've stopped removing these traces of him. They're not ghosts haunting me. They're proof that love doesn't end when a heartbeat stops. The truth about what Vincent did, what he prepared for, came to me in stages over the months that followed. Thomas gave me the full story one afternoon in his office, spreading documents across his desk like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. 17 years ago, 3 days before Vincent died, he amended our living trust. He added clauses that protected the apartment from being sold without Thomas's approval. He established safeguards around our bank accounts. He built legal walls that would remain invisible until someone tried to breach them. But more than that, Vincent had written me a letter. Thomas had kept it all these years, sealed in an envelope, with my name written in my husband's shaky handwriting. The letter he wrote when he knew he was dying, when he saw futures I couldn't yet imagine. I opened it alone in Thomas's office. And Vincent's voice reached across 18 years to speak to me one final time. My dearest Marianne, if you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was there. You would have tried to fix it yourself, and some things cannot be fixed. They can only be prepared for. I've watched Sophia since she was a teenager. I've seen the way she calculates, the way she measures everything in terms of what it can give her. I wanted to believe she would grow out of it, that maturity would teach her what childhood hadn't. But some patterns run too deep. I don't write this with anger. I write it with sadness. Our daughter learned somewhere, somehow, that love is transactional, that security comes from controlling everything around her. Maybe we failed her in some way I couldn't see. Maybe life taught her lessons we couldn't prevent. But I couldn't let her destroy you. So I did what I could. I built protections. I gave Thomas instructions. I left you this letter so you would know, when the moment came, that you were not alone. Do not hate her, Marianne. She is still our daughter, still the child we raised, even if she has become someone we don't recognize. But do not sacrifice yourself to save her. You cannot save someone who refuses to be saved. You can only protect yourself and hope that someday she finds her own way to healing. Trust Thomas. Trust yourself. And know that I loved you every day we had together, and will love you in whatever comes after. Forever yours, Vincent. I sat in Thomas's office and wept. Not the sharp grief of loss, not the hollow ache of absence, but something different, something I hadn't expected. I wept with gratitude, with awe, with love so profound it felt like drowning and flying at the same time. My husband had seen everything. He had known me better than I knew myself, known my blind spots, my weaknesses, my tendency to believe the best in people, even when evidence suggested otherwise. And he had worked around all of it to keep me safe. 18 years I had spent believing he left me unprepared. 18 years I had stumbled through widowhood thinking I faced the future alone. And all along he had been there, his love translated into legal documents and trusted friends, and a letter waiting for the moment I would need it most. He knew me better than I knew myself. He prepared for a war I didn't even see coming. And now it's my turn to live the life he fought so hard to protect. I've started teaching again, not in a classroom, but at the community center 3 blocks from my apartment. I lead a literature discussion group for adults every Tuesday evening. We read novels and poetry. We debate meanings and interpretations. We argue passionately about characters who exist only on paper, but somehow feel more real than the world outside. My students are people my own age, mostly. Retirees and widows and empty nesters, searching for purpose in the years after careers have ended and children have grown. But there are younger faces too. Single mothers who come straight from work. College students who heard about the class and were curious. Immigrants practicing their English through the language of story. We're reading Sylvia Plath right now, the same poet whose words hid my journal during those terrifying weeks when I was gathering evidence against my own daughter. When I told them that story, carefully, quietly, watching their faces, the room went silent. Then a woman in the back row, someone I had never seen speak before, raised her hand. "My son did something similar to me," she said. "He tried to get me declared incompetent so he could take over my finances. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was alone." Around the room, other hands went up. Other stories emerged. Other battles fought in silence. Other victories won through patience and preparation. We're not alone. None of us are. We just needed someone to speak first. Marcus has become a regular presence in my life again. Not as Sophia's husband, but as himself. He brings his new girlfriend to dinner sometimes, a kind woman named Rebecca, who works as a social worker and speaks to him with gentleness instead of control. I watch them together and see what a healthy relationship looks like, the give and take, the mutual respect. The way they make decisions together instead of one person dictating terms. Last month, Marcus told me he's been attending a support group for people who have left emotionally abusive relationships. He said it was hard at first, admitting that he had been a victim, that a man could be controlled and manipulated the way he was. But the group helped him understand that abuse doesn't discriminate, that strength isn't measured by whether you avoid being hurt, but by whether you find the courage to leave. "You taught me that, Mama Marianne," he said. "You showed me what it looks like to stand up for yourself, even when the person hurting you is supposed to love you." And put strong and back inside, we make a part of letter saying. Strong and back inside really helped me tell him that. Self. The same way we all do, through pain and consequence and the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. Put strong and back inside. The garden on my balcony has been restored. Mrs. Chen helped me plant new flowers this spring, choosing varieties that would bloom in succession so there would be color from April through October. Vincent would have loved it, the riot of petals, the hummingbirds that visit in the early morning, the way the sunset light catches the leaves and turns everything golden. I sit out there most evenings now, reading or just watching the city move beneath me. Sometimes I talk to Vincent, telling him about my day, about the students in my literature class, about the ways his love still protects me, even though his voice has been silent for 18 years. I don't know if he hears me. I don't know if anything exists beyond the life we're given. But speaking to him helps, so I do it anyway. This morning, I stood before Vincent's photograph in the living room, the silver frame polished, his smile unchanged by the years since it was captured. I placed a white flower in the small vase beside it, a ritual I've performed every week since returning to the apartment. "You protected us all," I said to his image, my voice steady despite the emotion beneath. "Even when you weren't here. Even when I didn't know I needed protecting. Thank you." Afterward, I sat at my desk and opened the journal I've kept since this ordeal began. The early entries are filled with confusion and fear, the frantic notes of a woman trying to make sense of betrayal. The later pages document evidence and strategy, the methodical work of building a case. But today I wrote about none of those things. Today I wrote about gratitude. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I was loved by someone who saw the future clearly, who understood threats I could not perceive, who built the fences I didn't know existed. Vincent taught me that protection is not about fighting, it's about preparing. It's about loving someone enough to shield them from dangers they cannot yet imagine. Mrs. Chen taught me that true friendship outlasts everything. It outlasts distance and time and even death. It waits patiently for the moment it is needed, then steps forward without hesitation or complaint. And Marcus taught me that it's never too late to find your way back. 8 years he spent lost in someone else's shadow, believing lies about himself and about me. But when the truth finally reached him, He chose to walk toward it rather than away. He chose honesty over fear. That choice required more courage than anything I've ever done. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the city stretching endlessly in every direction. Somewhere out there, people are fighting battles no one else can see. Somewhere, someone is being manipulated by a person they trust. Somewhere, someone feels alone and powerless and certain that no one will believe them. If that someone is you, I want you to know you are not alone. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Reach out to people who can help. Lawyers, counselors, support groups, hotlines. The National Elder Abuse Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-677-1116. They will listen. They will believe you. They will help you find resources. You deserve to be protected. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to live without fear in the home you built, the life you created. And you are stronger than you know. I stood back up, not because I'm special, but because I had people who refused to let me fall. If you feel my words resonating in your heart, if this story touched something deep inside you, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're from, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community, so we can bring more truthful stories to you. Stories of resilience, of courage, of women who refuse to be erased. Thank you for staying with me through Marianne's entire journey. This story was about more than revenge or justice. It was about the quiet strength of preparation, the enduring power of love that reaches beyond the grave, and the courage it takes to stand back up when someone tries to knock you down. Marianne didn't win because she shouted the loudest or fought the hardest. She won because Vincent loved her enough to see danger coming and build walls she didn't know existed. She won because Mrs. Chen kept watch without being asked. She won because Marcus, despite everything, found the strength to choose truth over fear. These are the victories that matter most, not the dramatic confrontations, but the quiet moments when someone refuses to let you fall. If this story touched you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and tell me what moment affected you the most. Was it Vincent's letter? The forged signature? The moment Marcus finally stood up to Sophia? Your feedback helps me create more stories that resonate with what matters to you. Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might be going through something similar. Feeling alone, feeling powerless, wondering if anyone sees what they're enduring. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bonds that hold families together even when blood tries to tear them apart. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, and you deserve to be protected.